Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. We're gonna wait 2 more minutes to let everybody join, and then we're gonna start. Thank you. So, hi, everybody. So we're gonna start. People can join as we go. So welcome to our webinar, Infostealer Infections in the Philippines. Will be presented by Tanya and Nathaniel from Cyberint. The webinar is recorded, and you will get the recording in a few days. There is also time in the end for Q&A. Feel free to write your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom. I will hand it over to Tanya. Enjoy.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. And glad to see you here again. This is our quarterly webinar for BIP. This is webinar for Q3. We'll be discussing the Infostealer infections in the Philippines, and specifically their relevance and the threat they're posing to the financial sector. My name is Tanya. I think most of you have already met me in previous webinars. I'm the Customer Success Manager for the BAP engagement with Cyberint. And just one more thing before we start, please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box during the session. They will be answered by my teammates here behind the scenes, and we will be reading some of them and elaborating in the end of the session. My partner for the webinar today will be Nathan Marasigan. He is the Senior Intelligence Analyst.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Here in Cyberint. He will be presenting the results of his research into the Infostealer threat to the financial sector in the Philippines. So the agenda for today is basically, first of all, to present the Infostealer threat and the most common ways of spreading of infection. Then we will see why the Philippines users are so much targeted, and if they are so much targeted, how this is happening. Then the next topic will be to review the specific threat to the financial sector, because as far as we investigated this, the Infostealer threats actually allows the threat actor to leverage additional attack vectors and to effectively steal money from the victims' banking accounts, despite the protection layers implemented by the banks. And then we will discuss what can we do, if at all, in order to minimize this threat to the banking client. So first of all, let's define what are Infostealer. Basically, this is a quite simple strain of malware one of the less sophisticated ones. It's extremely popular among cyber criminals and threat actors in general. This is not something that is used only by sophisticated APT nation state actors. It's the opposite. It's very popular, and because of its business model that we will discuss in the next slides, it's very easy to be used even by low-skilled script kiddies, even by not that sophisticated threat actors, because of the popularity and the easiness of usage. So the main activity of the Infostealer after it successfully deploys on the victim's computer is to steal different types of information that are stored on the victim's machine, mainly in the browser. This includes, of course, username and passwords. This is the main goal of the Infostealer, to steal and to send to the attacker the usernames and the passwords stored in the victim's browser, the ones that you usually will save in the browser in order to not type them every time again and again when you log in into different portals and accounts, including, by the way, your online banking website. But besides the username and the passwords, it will also steal and send to the attacker other types of information stored in the machine and in the browser, including sessions, cookies, cryptocurrency wallets, payment card data, which is also very much relevant for the banks, because sometimes when you type in your payment card data, the browser will ask you if to save the information for next time you will have to type it, and if you say yes, then information will be saved in the browser and subject to the Infostealer activity if you get infected in the future. Some of the Infostealers are also capable to steal several file types saved on the computer, such as picture, different types of documents, and so on, so that the threat actors expand their foothold on the machine. They know more now about the victim, and they can even implement different types of social engineering in the next steps of their attack on the victims of the Infostealer. And of course, other type of information on the machine, FTP connections, instant messages, application sessions such as Telegram, WhatsApp, and so on, screenshots, and the information about the machine itself, geolocation, information about the installed software, information about the operation system, and so on. So basically, once an Infostealer is successfully deployed and starts to transfer the information about the machine to the threat actor, everything is exposed to the attacker. A whole bunch of information, personal, confidential information of the victim is now sent to the threat actor. And let's see how it actually looks like. What you are seeing here now is screenshots of logs sent to the CNC server of the Redline Infostealer. Redline is a very popular one. You can easily purchase it via different dark web forums and via different Telegram channels. Not very expensive, something between 100 and 300 US dollars. So if you are ready to invest this money for the future profit, and we will later see which kind of profit you can get from operating this Infostealer. So if you invest this money in order to purchase it, you are the owner of this Redline Infostealer with all the relevant infrastructure for a successful operation. So these are the logs that are extracted from an infected machine. This is a real machine of a real Filipino user. We obfuscated here personal information of that user, but this is a real one that was infected a couple of days ago. And you can see a lot of information, and this is, by the way, just the tip of the iceberg of what was sent to the attacker, that was sent via the logs to the threat actor. So on the left side, you can see information about the machine itself, the file location when the threat actor installed the stealer. The victim's name is something with Adriano. We obfuscated his first name. We see here location in Malolos, Bulacan province. We see different information about the operation system, available keyword layouts. He's using English language for the Philippines. The parameters of the hardware of his machine. And here in the middle side of the screen, we see different types of personal information that this user saved on his computer, maybe not one user, but also other people from the same household that save their data in the browser. We see here addresses that were saved, first names of the people, last names, married last name, phone number, address, and so on and so forth. So a whole bunch of personal information that is now in the possession of the threat actor who infected this user. And the jewel of the crown on the right side of the screen, a whole long list of different usernames and passwords for the URLs that this user has access. For example, number one in the list is his live account with username and password. Then we also see that somebody else used phone number that is available here as a username for the live.com account, Google password, Twitter password, another Google password, maybe from another member of this family, Facebook password, and so on and so forth. When you scroll down this list, you will be able to see also banking information, government portal login data. So basically, the whole digital life and identity of this victim is now in the hands of the threat actor. Let's now inspect how the business model behind this Infostealer malwares is operating. On the right side, you can see an advertisement. Sorry, just a second. So this on the right side of the screen, this is the advertising pasted in Russian language, posted on Russian language on one of the forums that we are monitoring here on Cyberins. It says raccoon to the moon. Raccoon is the name of a very popular info stealer, which is being advertised on Russian forums. It was developed by Russian threat actors, but the usage is not limited only to Russian speakers. So everybody who wants, you can see here, maybe it's a bit vague, the price for one build, one instance of this raccoon Infostealer, it's just $50 US. They describe it, its features, very marketing post. So they basically operated as a well-established business. And once you pay this $50, you will get one instance of the raccoon Infostealer, including the infrastructure, including the CNC server. So basically everything you need to operate this malware. You do not have to do a lot of technical deployment on your own because everything is already ready for operation by the threat actors behind this malware. So basically, they're not selling just the malware, they're selling the whole infrastructure for operation. We call this MAAS, malware as a service model. It includes the malware for the deployment. It includes the CNC infrastructure to basically present the data that is sent back to the attackers. And it includes also the cryptors. The cryptors is a tool to obfuscate the stealer file, to evade protection layers, because these malwares are so popular, they're easily detected by antiviruses and by Windows Defender. So each time they will launch a campaign to distribute one of these info stealers, they will run it through this scripter to obfuscate and encrypt the file itself. And this way, it will take maybe 1-2 more days until antiviruses start to recognize it as a variation of a known malware. So this allows them to evade infection and be more efficient in the distribution between different victims. As you see here in the bottom, the price is very low in terms of the cybercrime world. Sorry, we even saw that if you search good, if you compare prices, you can get it as low as just $50 and you are ready for starting the infection on your potential victims. To expand a bit, a couple more words about the business model, about the ecosystem of this Infostealer, because this one is very developed, it's very well established, and the chain is so productized that it allows even very low skilled threat actors to place themselves in some link here in this chain and to get their share of the profit. So of course, the first link in the chain are the software developers, the ones that create the source code of the malware. They have to be the tech guys, the developers, the coders. They do not have to be the ones that are actually distributing them or monetizing the stolen data. They can keep themselves clean in the top of the process, just create the malware and sell it to the next step of the chain. By the way, not always they code from scratch their malwares. Sometimes they will take already old and known code and just change it a bit in order to make the detection even more complex. But in general, they can keep themselves out of the criminal world and far from prosecution because they're not involved in the actual campaigns and the malware distribution. Then the next step in the chain will be the malware sellers, the ones that posted this type of advertisement that I showed you before. They are members of different hacking communities, and they will advertise their malware for rent in a malware as a service model for other members of that hacking communities. Then the next step will be the distributors. It's not a must-have chain. You can do it also on your own after you purchase the malware as a service from the seller. But if you do not have enough time or do not want to do it on your own, you can also go to the people who are whose expertise is to distribute malspam or create social engineering campaigns or create malicious Google Ads campaign or deploy the malware built on vulnerable websites and so on. So they will sell you their method for distribution, and all you have to provide them is just the malicious file that will steal their credentials from the victim's computer. So after the malware campaign is launched and it starts the infection, the credentials are starting to arrive to the CNC panel, and then the operator of the malware needs to decide what is the best way for him to get rich and to monetize the stolen information. Of course, he can start to exploit it on his own, but there is so much information coming from different platforms, different banks, different social media accounts, that possibly he will not have the time and the capacity to monetize each and every pair of credentials he steals. So then he will go to dedicated platforms, dedicated darknet marketplaces, where he sells the stolen credentials to people who search to monetize a specific type of credentials. For example, if I have a good scheme for stealing money from a client of a specific bank, I will go to such marketplace and search for credentials to this specific platform. I will filter them by link, by the URL that I want to attack. It's very easy, very convenient, and very friendly. And sometimes the interfaces of these marketplaces are not less convenient than just shopping in Amazon or another shopping, legitimate shopping platform. So once I have in my cart the information that I want to buy from these marketplaces, the credentials and so on, I can go to the next step and try to monetize these credentials, whether it's for online banking system, whether it's for social media or any other type of platform, maybe eBay, maybe Amazon, that I have an efficient way to use the credentials that have been stolen and then later sold on the dark web. And here you can see two local examples from such a marketplace. These screenshots were taken from Argos, our system for monitoring of dark web marketplaces. These two lists come from the Russian market, a known marketplace for trade in stolen credentials. This is the link in the chain when the malware operators go and sell their thousands of credentials on a dedicated platform. So as you can see here, these logs were offered for sale just a couple of days ago, July and August. These ones are for Philippine users. I just filtered the marketplace looking for users from the Philippines, and all these URLs that you can see here are URLs for which the malware was able to steal the credentials. I obfuscated here the names of the banks that I found in the logs, but the obfuscated ones are local Philippine banks. So we know that the logs include also credentials for online banking. But besides this, there is a whole long list of Philippine websites, and not only Philippine, by others such as PayPal and Facebook and Twitter, governmental websites, so on and so forth. That once I buy this log, and by the way, the price is just $10 for this one. Once I pay this $10 to the marketplace, I will own credentials of this specific user for all the websites, for all the URLs that you can see here in the screen. Log number 1 comes from the Raccoon Infostealer. Log number 2 comes from the Redline Infostealer. Two of them are extremely popular in the Philippines, and we are witnessing very extensive campaigns, on very frequent campaigns of these two Infostealer targeted against Philippine users. I will now pass the mic to Nathan to elaborate a bit about the evidence he gathered from his sources about the local angle of the Infostealer operations.
Thanks, Tanya. So again, in the previous slide, we have shown you bits of the Infostealer ecosystem, specifically credential sellers who post and advertises their stolen credentials in malware log shops, just like in the previous slides. Now, what you see here are evidences of further leveraging by local threat actors. So as part of the Infostealer ecosystem, there are credential buyers here in the Philippines, local threat actors, and there is indeed a market in the Philippines for those online banking credentials that were stolen by Infostealers. Now, in the Philippines, we can observe these credential buyers existing in social media sites. For example, this one in Facebook. They can exist also on other messaging platforms. They advertise their intent to purchase online banking credentials, sometimes in closed or open forums, closed and open messaging platforms such as public or private Telegram groups, public or private Facebook groups. Some local threat actors also post their intent, just like what you see here, in a clever manner. So this snapshot, as what you can see here, is an evidence that there is indeed a market. And again, this one is quite clever. He advertises this intent to purchase those logs, or what, or in local term, or in PA slang, what you call logs means credentials, or he refers to as online banking credentials in a Facebook story, which typically would disappear after 24 hours, and there is no URL that can be retrieved. So those who hold credentials, of course, whether stolen by any manner, and this includes credentials that were purchased on malware log shops, stolen by info stealers. They can just contact him or her directly via private messages for the TA's operational security reasons. So again, this threat actor, this is actually a prominent threat actor in the local scene. He looks for online banking credentials of a local bank. And as he said here, even if there's no mobile number included, as long as there is an interesting balance within the account, he mentioned that he has capabilities to cash out or do unauthorized transactions once he purchased those credentials or logs, as you say. So Philippine users are heavily targeted or much more infected compared to other countries. So based on CyberInt's research in the second quarter of 2022, the Philippines ranked number 7 globally in terms of Infostealer infections. So why is that? Our theories is that it can be attributed that the Philippines, of course, is an internet and social media savvy country. We are one of the countries which spend most of our time in our PCs, in our devices. And of course, the Philippines is still a third world country. The lower income class and the middle income class is still much larger in volume compared to those in higher income class. And why is that related? For example, if I came from the lower income class or middle class, and I do not have the money to pay for legitimate software, for example, I do not have the money to pay for streaming services, Netflix and other similar media streaming content. So why would I, of course, pay for those if I can access these content, this software, these movies, and my favorite shows to, for example, sites offering free streaming services, or sites offering key generators or software cracks. So that's still related. And of course, in the Philippines, we want it to be free as much as possible, and we would tend to go to those sites and go to those piracy sites, and instead of making a purchase, because it would hurt my wallet as an average Filipino citizen. Now, what related to this is the main infection vectors. So how a victim does get infected by these info stealers? So info stealer developers and sellers, the earlier part of the ecosystem, do not provide or suggest a delivery method. So leaving this to the info stealer PAs, or the ones who are doing the campaign, to establish a decision on how would they distribute it. So these are just some of the examples on how these info stealers are distributed. So first of all, malspams or malicious spams or documents, links attached in malicious emails. So malspams, as we all know, is the bread and butter for all types of threat actors. So this includes, again, distribution of these info stealers. So as we all know, threat actors would use different types of lures in the email body and the theme of the message. For example, free package, you are selected on a promo or something like that. And they would typically include malicious links or weaponized documents, weaponized malicious Word or Excel files, or something that impersonates as a legitimate file in the email body or in the attachment, with the end goal, of course, of delivering an info stealer once the end user got victimized by that link or that document. So it can also be distributed, the info stealer, through targeted online communities and sites offering free access. So this is what I've provided as an example earlier. Sites offering free access, for example, free media streaming services, or those sites that offers or makes key generators for softwares and cracks available to the public. So they would it would be common to obtain or get infected by using those software cracks, illegitimate software, and free streaming services. Or sometimes more currently, due to the rising interest in cryptocurrency, threat actors would typically make up a fake cryptocurrency website and distribute it to social media platforms or or messaging groups. So it would still be a vector again for the delivery of info stealers. And what else? Cryptocurrency theme communities, gaming communities, software related communities for keygens and cracks, and other messaging channels such as Discord or Telegram groups, in which a threat actor may just send a malicious link to those groups with the end goal of delivering the info stealers. Or some would just, of course, typically distribute a malicious link through your favorite chat application, Facebook Messenger, or through their Facebook posts. So that's the second most common infection vector. And again, the third most common is drive-by downloads. So aside from these malicious links that are delivered in social media, in messaging channels, in your chat applications, on the third screenshot here, what you see is an info stealer distribution that was delivered via poisoned search engine results. So for example, I'm a typical user. I'm too lazy to go to the official websites of my favorite bank, and I would just type in my Google browser how to apply for this and that for this bank, how to get a credit card statement on this bank through my favorite search engine. Then some threat actors would use poison search engine results to redirect the poisoned search engine result to malicious infrastructure. In this case, it automatically downloads a malicious file that with the end goal of delivering an info stealer. So again, malspams, targeted online communities, and sites offering free access, and of course, drive-by downloads.
I would also like to add a bit to what Nathan just explained and to emphasize that the disinfection vectors are really not focused on the financial sector or on user of a specific bank or specific platform. These infection vectors are targeting the masses of the people, the ones with the low awareness for security, because all of you that attend this webinar will not probably fall into these very simple and very unsophisticated infection vectors. But for the masses of the people, the ones that do not have high awareness to security, they just want to watch their favorite show or to download something from the web. They're not familiar enough with the security threats. They are the ones that are going to be targeted by this and infected, successfully infected with this Infostealer. The problem starts is because these users are also happen to be clients of specific banks, and their financial information is being stolen by that same Infostealers, as we just showed you in the beginning of the presentation. So if I have to summarize why the Philippine users are so much infected by Infostealer, that they are ranked number 7 globally in the terms of Infostealer victims, I would say it's a combination of low security awareness between the masses of the users and something that reinforces further infection, because once threat actor see it's a successful infection, he will be motivated to continue and launch more and more campaigns. And also, once he's successful in stealing, for example, a list of email addresses, then his next round of campaigns, these users will also be infected or targeted at least with the same malware. So what happens? We have here kind of a vicious circle. Users are more targeted, their information is being stolen, and then this information is being used in new campaigns, and this way the circle continues. So why banks should be concerned about this threat? Because we already said it's not something focused directly on the financial sector. The TTPs, the infection vectors, are usually not financially themed, and basically the threat is against low-hanging fruits, against users of unprotected websites, against users with low security awareness. So reason number 1 why banks should be concerned is that we see a constantly growing number of banking credentials that are being harvested by Infostealers. From month to month, we report to our financial customers more and more compromised credentials that have been stolen via this vector. So we see that as more users are being infected, of course, this is logical, the more financial data is being exposed and getting to the hands of the threat actors. Now, reason number 2 is that this encourages the threat actors and motivate them, the local ones, to search for further flaws, for further vulnerabilities and business logic bypasses in the banking applications and online websites, so that they can monetize these credentials. So once they already have the username and the password, they will need just the OTP in order to successfully transfer the money from the compromised account. And that creates a huge motivation for a local scene of threat actors to develop and find these types of flaws and vulnerabilities in banking apps. Of course, they also can use the social engineering. This will always work because this is targeted on the weakest link in the security chain, the human factor. So once they have these credentials and we see that they can obtain them for very cheap prices, such as $10 on online marketplaces, then they will have to get the OTP via social engineering or via some kind of bypass directly in the online system of the bank.
Now, aside from those credentials that are being harvested by these info stealers, what other important customer info that can be stolen by these info stealers. Now, what you see here are files, or the actual files that were stolen or extracted by the malware from a victim machine. And if I as a threat actor purchase this malware logs, as we call it, I can see very interesting other types of information aside from payment card information or online credentials. On this second screenshot here, this user sometimes lists different personal identifiable information, government ID numbers, or other important sensitive information related to his government memberships, for example, Pag-ibig, POA, OWA, SSS. And on this third screenshot here, there is an interesting file. And of course, as a typical user, and if I get victimized, sometimes users just create their notes on their desktop or in their documents, and sometimes save sensitive information there. And I as a threat actor got hold of this one. I can see much more interesting information such as mobile numbers, bank account numbers, as you can see in the third screenshot. Sometimes it lists the branch of account where where the deposit account was created. And sometimes users would also list down the transactions that were made, for example, on a certain type of time frame. So these are much more, these are in addition to to expose credentials or compromised credentials and payment card information, what else could be in the content of those malware logs? So again, these are the more, or somehow more interesting files that can be stolen from the malware log infection. Sensitive files that were stored by victims in their local machine, aside from those credentials or payment card information. Now, as Tanya have said earlier, some threat actors, and we have seen these in the local threat actor scene, are expressing interest on these online banking credentials or logs, as they call it. So they, on this screenshot here, as an evidence, these local threat actor express purchase or intend to purchase bank customer credentials so that it can be leveraged for allegedly an OTP bypass. And he advertises his intent to purchase these logs, and according to him, he has explored an OTP bypass and an online banking application of a certain bank, and as an affiliate or as a partnership, they would distribute the income based on the results of these logs or online banking credentials. And what's interesting here is that he said that there is no cash. He tested it, and there is no cash out limit, and he can sniff out all the money of these accounts based on his testing and based on the OTP bypass method that he allegedly discovered against a local bank. Now, what can be done, Tanya?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. So let's discuss what can be done against this malicious activity. So the first step that will come to one's mind is to educate the customers. But this is a very challenging step because this is not a traditional phishing operation. This is not something that is targeted directly on the banks. So once we are handling phishing against clients of a specific bank, that bank can come and say to our customers, please be vigilant, please only click on legitimate links. These are the red flags that you should pay attention to when you try to access your online banking. But what happens when this threat is waiting for the victim everywhere in the web? Once they want to download a game they're playing, or once they want to download some extension to their browser, or just click on a link on the website that was hacked and infected by the malware. First of all, you cannot cover all these instances just because there are so many. And second of all, there is this question that to which extent the banks are responsible for the online behavior of their users. Because in the end, the banks will be blamed once the money is siphoned from the victim's accounts. But these victims were infected in a way that has no relation to the bank at all. So as we see, the customer education angle is quite complicated and involves not only security aspects, but also marketing aspects, communication aspects, and eventually it can even raise suspicions and questions from the customers. And even when you come and say to this customer, look, I have here evidence from my Intel provider that you have been infected with a malware and your banking data was compromised, then the customer can answer, but what happens? How do you know that I was infected? Are the banks monitoring my computer and so on? And these are real cases that we encountered with our customers. So the mitigation here in terms of customer education can be quite complicated, and we are not sure that this is the best recommended approach to fight this threat. Then another direction to pursue, and we believe this is the best direction, and we will also show you evidence why we believe this, is to implement and to harden the security of online banking and of mobile apps in terms of creating multiple OTPs, not only when transferring money, but also for logging into the application and for performing other more simple activities such as viewing the balance and so on. This will help to prevent the money stealing by because if it's an option to bypass one OTP, when we have multiple OTPs, it will be much more harder for the threat actors to overcome those and to actually get to the point when he can't steal the money. So here we have the question of user experience. Users usually do not have patience to go through complicated processes until they can successfully perform the operation for which they logged into the application. If I want to transfer my money, I do not want to click 3 OTPs. I do not want to get 3 SMSs with the code or to remember another PIN code. And then the security measure pose a challenge for banks because it in constant conflict with the user experience. So this is something that banks need to consider together with their product teams, with their application teams, with their marketing teams, whether it worth to sacrifice a bit from the user experience in order to make the security of the online websites and mobile apps higher and better, and to prevent this simple but effective threat to be successful in stealing money from the victim's account. And of course, we recommend to conduct periodic VAPTs on the systems, including their APIs, in order to prevent any type of flow or business logic bypass that will allow these threat actors to get the OTPs of the Infostealer victims. Because even though they can still use social engineering, if they have this flow or this API vulnerability or this business logic bypass, then they can perform much more harmful operation, not against one user for which they manage to do the social engineering attack, but for hundreds and thousands of users at one time, because they have this flow and this OTP bypass, as which is Nathan showed you just in the previous slide.
Now, as our concluding slide, what you see here is an evidence from CyberInt's engagement on a threat actor. So again, he or she is looking for these credentials or these logs, as they call it, and they invest much effort to study the system of the bank, the processes of the bank, to explore business logic bypasses of the banks, or maybe API vulnerabilities on those banks. And he invested so much effort, and he identifies that some of these banks, these local banks, have potential bypasses, whether on paying bills or doing unauthorized transactions or unauthorized logins. Now, what this means is there are really threat actors who is studying your application, your websites, the flaws of your banking processes. And again, as a threat actor with enough time, dedication, and perseverance, I would be able to explore these bypasses. And once I have this malware logs or online banking credentials in combination of what I discovered are bypasses in your system, then it would really create or wreak havoc in performing unauthorized logins and unauthorized transactions from these harvested credentials.
All right. So this was the main portion of what we wanted to share with you today. We have some interesting questions in the Q&A box, and we also have some people raising their hands. Idan, can you please help us with the people who raised their hands to ask their questions?
Yes, I can try, but of course you can write down the question here and we can read it out loud.
All right. So in the meantime, we were asked about the legal prosecution against the operators of these threat actors. So first of all, the ones that rent and buy these infostealers and launch these campaigns, usually located outside of the Philippines, and they were very hard to prosecute. The ones that are local are the ones who try to have to get the OTP. Sorry?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Tanya, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Myla here.
Yeah, hi. Nice to see you.
Hi. Yeah, sorry before you leave. I know we're almost done, but just going back to your how do we address these things? I just wonder how can VAPT help us prevent these things when actually they're getting credentials. So even if we do VAPT, strengthen our APIs, it's the same thing if they're using legitimate credentials of our employees.
Yeah,
Also,
you are
the same
correct.
with OTP. What's the point of having an OTP when, well, actually it might prevent some online transactions requiring OTP, but it's not really going to be effective. What is the cybersecurity industry ecosystem doing about this? Like, for example, if you already know what are the popular ones, can't at least, EDR solution providers help with this or develop something that can detect these things? Or do we need to, is there an action or is there anything that is more practical and more effective than doing a VAPT and OTP? I think it's not going to be effective if the point of compromise is actually stealing credentials, stealing their phones and what have you. They might even change the information already. So what's the point of having more OTPs if the OTP is sent on your mobile number anyway? So is there anything more about this? This Infostealer has been out there for a while already, and it's just surprising that there's still no update on what kind of counter measures are out there already by, and there are expensive EDR solutions. This is an attack on device, right? This is an attack on a device. So why, we can't put all the controls on our applications? So what's the update on this?
So these are very good questions, Myla. And first of all, I must say that EDRs will not be useful here because you can deploy the best and the most expensive EDR on your own system and protect your employees, but you cannot protect all your customers on their home devices, right? There is absolutely nothing the bank can do to protect the machines of the customers that are not they do not have this awareness to protect themselves from downloading malware. What the bank can do is to make sure that their applications are best protected against any type of OTP bypass, because the OTP is the only way here that the bank can stop these threat actors from stealing the money. It's correct, they have the username and the password, and they can completely legitimately log into your customer's account and see all his activity. But once they want to actually steal the money, they need to click, they need to input the OTP, and that one they can get only by performing social engineering attack on the victim. But if the bank implemented several OTPs for several screens and operations in the application, it will be much more difficult to get all these OTPs from the victim. Because, for example, if I'm a threat actor that's I'm calling you and I'm saying you, yeah, listen, I'm from your bank and I need your OTP. So, okay, you can give it to me once. But then if I call you again in 5 minutes and say, okay, I need another OTP, it starts to sound more suspicious, right? And then what we were telling about the VAPT is that to make sure that your applications are safe enough in terms of disclosing this OTP, in terms of allowing a business logic bypass on the APIs when this OTP can be extracted by the threat actors in a workaround way and not directly from the application. So these are the two recommendations that we have for now. If you are asking about more unified approach on an industry level, then it will be quite challenging because the developers and the sellers of these Infostealers are not located in the Philippines. They're usually operating from other countries. It's extremely hard to persecute them, and it's very hard to control the attack vectors because they can place their Infostealers in every place that you can think of in the internet. So it's really hard to understand what is their next step and protect the users, because you cannot be in charge of what your customers are doing. I hope this makes sense. We are almost out of time. I'm just trying to pick maybe one or two more questions from the Q&A board. So One thing that I wanted to say, we'll be sharing with you the recording of this webinar, and we will attach some reports about Infostealer that we have been researching here in Cyberint. Some of these reports also include IOCs, as because we have been asked about IOCs. Please note, however, that these IOCs are not very useful. They're constantly changing from campaign to campaign. And please remember this, that this threat is not targeted on your organizational network. It's not targeting the employees of the banks, because I assume that even if you have a very simple and not sophisticated protection layer on your organizational network, it will be enough to protect you from these infostealers. The threat is against your customers. It's against the whole Filipino users in general, and it's very hard to protect them because you cannot educate everybody and you cannot urge them to block these IOCs on their home computers. Another question that we have been asked, and I think this will be the last one as we are out of time, is about the targeting of mobile system versus web system. So the good news is that infostealers are mainly targeting 99% of the infostealers that we encountered are targeting only web platforms. They're not compatible with mobile devices. The bad news is that if you are a user that uses the same configurations for your browser, both on web and mobile, for example, if you're accessing your banking application only from your mobile, but the same browser settings are used also on your web browser, once your web browser is infected, then all the data will be stolen, including the banking data that you were using only on your mobile. So yeah, this is the situation. We have learned today that this is a very common threat targeting the Philippine users and masses and posing a significant threat to the banking industry. Thank you for joining. We will be sharing the recording in a few days, and we will be glad to see you again in our next webinar in Q3.
Thank you all for joining. There is a short survey in the end, if you can please fill it out. And of course, we will answer all the questions privately. Feel free to contact us, and we will get the webinar recording in a few days. Thank you again for joining.
Thank you. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.